could make you love you enough to carry you instead of rifles. As if it's really an equation. I used to think they were the same thing. Any means necessary. Last day obituary, brothers. But there's petty crime on the front lines and blood in my eyes, cause I can't define the finish line. We post lookout on your shoulders. Police boast as if it's all over, but our strategy's intact. We're tripping over trophies posed as terrorist attacks.
Black August, callous hands, man-child dying. Price paid, bullets for slaves, guards cannon. For non-action, parties been split to two factions. Cross dissolver, black revolver. Tell the judge this will soon be over. Empty the holster, Chairman Mao sculpture. Drowning from the blood in my eye. Come Jehovah, 10 years on the one to life. One smoke, 100 stripes. Barrel kiss the officer's windpipe. Rifles.
I wish that I could make you love you enough to carry you instead of rifles. As if it's really an equation. You or me, we or they, bullet play. I used to think they were the same thing. Any means necessary. Last day obituary, brothers. There's petty crime on the front lines and blood in my eyes, cause I can't define the finish line. We post lookout though on your shoulders. Our strategy's intact. Police boast as if it's all over. Tripping over trophies posed as terrorist attacks.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like live right here at Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, happy to be your host. I just wanted to start with a little something. So, once upon a time, my favorite project, it was the subject of my dissertation, the subject of my first book, and really the only, definitely my favorite project was when we were making Free Mix Radio, the original mixtape radio show, distributed freely in the streets of Washington, D.C. as initially part of an extension of Organized Community of United People, Organized Coup, with the idea of not only spreading an emancipatory journalistic message, but secondarily reminding many in the hip hop world and in the Black world that rap music, never mind the other elements, was still being used to its original foundational radical purpose by a world majority of people who produce it. I've lost enough touch that I won't make the claim confidently as I used to, but it was for a time very clear to me that overwhelmingly the rap music being produced in the world was at least left of center politically, if not far off to the militant end. It was just harder to reach than ever because increasingly with a tighter control over a handful of corporations and their ability to penetrate and proliferate at levels never seen before, they were able to shape an environment that fraudulently positioned hip hop and rap music as an extension of the state and of capital. So that was the Cornell West theory. Shout out to them. Shout out to DC. Shout out to Malcolm X Park. It will never be Meridian Hill or whatever the hell they want to call it. I don't care how many gentrifiers moved in there. Shout out to that whole community where that video was shot. Shout out to all of them and a lot of the great music that they continue to produce. So I just wanted to start with that because having concluded this PBS series, I mean, oh my God, on some level it's worse than I thought. So bear with me, remixers who are here live. Welcome. I'm not going to jump into the chat until later, just to focus. It's only going to take a couple minutes, and then I'll happily build for a little bit at least. And and those who will see this later, welcome and peace to you as well. So 2 quick points. Well, 3. Well, yeah. One is that the final episode of this PBS series is titled Still Fighting, which I think is important as a precursor, foreshadowing, or as they said on Archer, call me Frankie foreshadowing. My second point, thinking of my classes and others, is that how can the youth know better? I feel like more than ever after watching and concluding this series, we can never again, we can't get mad at young people for not knowing anything. We just can't. Like how could we expect? And this is where I will always, we'll have to pick this up maybe on Friday on Earn Your Liberation when Diallo gets back. How could we expect a LeBron or any other athlete to emerge from this madness and reach our conclusions if we are not producing the interruptive moment that will absolutely have to occur if we want anyone of the so-called mainstream or, or the regular or whoever the rank and file or just people who have not been interrupted in their process. I think all of us who gather here routinely at least, have had variations of interruptive moments. It took me a couple of them. Still need some. So the idea that, when you get this narrative so that was the first. The other point, so then I wrote here, no documentary that praises Eminem and does not even mention wise, intelligent, or poor righteous teachers, X-Clan, native tongues, not even a mention of Tribe Called Quest. De La, rest in peace, Dave. No Immortal Technique. No Paris, who wrote Chuck D's last album. Nothing of this kind can be considered anything other than what it is: illegitimate colonial propaganda, psychological warfare. This is horrific. All right, so let's just run through what happened. And shout out to the couple people who have let me know that they've watched the series sort of along with these commentaries and found value in that. And I don't, although a couple of you told me you still like the series, I don't know how that, I just can't, anyway. So it starts off right out the gate with Fat Joe talking about the time shifting to it was, as he said, who was going to be an entrepreneur and a millionaire. So what folks may not remember, Fat Joe at one point was himself part of the controversial moment. And I want to say specifically it was with a Sprite commercial where there was still this moment. People don't remember this too well, and it's certainly not encouraged that we remember. There was a moment, not just in hip hop, but all rock and roll. Do you remember when Neil Young even made a song at one point criticizing, I think at the time, Eric Clapton for selling out? There was this moment where there were artists publicly struggling with, are we really going to just go ahead and grab this bag? And even within hip hop, it was, are we really, this idea that it went automatically from we're just trying to survive to go get the bag and become a millionaire and not. No, there was an actual moment, brief as it may be. EPMD famous, I mentioned it today on the remix, but EPMD famously even did a song called The Crossover, sort of capturing the moment of saying, they said, I don't want your white audience if it means I got to change my clothes and change my dress and change there was even, again, it's not some radical revolutionary necessarily in all cases, but there was this idea of, no, it's not just an automatic net positive that everybody does a Sprite commercial. So, of course, it's Fat Joe who's brought in here. Moni Love brought in there more or less saying the same thing. Yeah, you want to do something for the culture, she says, but you want to get paid too. And of course, but there was this moment where there was a question about what does that mean? And then anybody can then say that. Everybody wants to get paid. So what level of sin, so to speak, are we willing to forgive under the auspices of I just needed to get paid? And then no disrespect, but I'm thinking like Moni Love's ability to stay paid through hip hop required her to go overseas, find her way as a DJ, as a this, as a that. She didn't have there was no room for her, especially after Queen Latifah and others made their move to the center. There's only going to be one or two women. Anyway. Then there's this one mention where Chuck D in narration says, yeah, the record labels were stripping back the politics, he says. But there was still a lot for us to fight about. And then they bring in Rudy Giuliani as mayor of New York, who was horrible. And everybody, even those of us growing up down here in this tree-lined streets, knew how bad Rudy Giuliani was. And one of my favorite bits of knowledge, you know what, can I even pull this up? I should have thought of this in advance. Can I even pull this up real quick? Because this was my favorite. I wrote about it. When I heard it, there was a video to it. Hold on. This came out on a mixtape.
If you see a devil smash him.
Yeah, screwball shit. Yeah. Come on, yo. Little something for that snake ass, slimy ass, devil ass motherfucker out there. Listen to this. Suck on it, bitch. Nah, I mean, screwball shit. What? Yeah. Check it out, yo. Hey, yo, who shot Rudy in broad daylight for cash? I woke up this morning and heard the news flash. They said it happened down at City Hall. He had his wife with him. 5 shots from the crowd made him fall. It was chaos and pandemonium. Blood covered up the podium, covered his face and wouldn't show me him. I had to see if it was true. Secret Service was mad nervous. So was the boys in blue, scattering like rats and gnats with the lights on. Manhunt the suspect all night long. Interrupted episodes, every channel sold. Barricaded the city and blocked every road. Jakes and riot gear, black smiling head air. Supporters crying out in the street. You ain't want it, ain't dead off. Somebody blew his head off and skated out. Commissioner live on Channel 5 when they announced his death. Wifey was stressed, she was right there. She stated it was like a nightmare. One time was combing the streets, had the whole force on the beat, flying the cars and on feet. The D's came through, stomping. Ghetto birds had the projects looking like Compton with marksmen with 30-30s out their window. I'm in my room smoking boom, playing Nintendo, high off the endo. Don't shoot. Shot Rudy. Rich house to poorhouse. Keep people shouting. Brooklyn, Long Island. We X some money making. Why yo a new road? The new Shiloh. Who shot Rudy? From courthouse to your house. Rich house to poorhouse. Keep people shouting. Brooklyn, Long Island. We X some money making. Why yo a new road? The new Shiloh.
So, I mean, you know, apparently they must have updated that video post Ferguson and Mike Brown. But when that track came out, it was in the earlier 2000s. And in the original documentary about another thing absented from this series, there was a whole documentary about Rap and Tell Pro, the hip hop cop. And technically a former comrade in the sense that we were all in the Malcolm X grassroots movement at the time. King, tall brother, light-skinned dude, King, was in the documentary questioning the cop and talking, and Screwball, who you just saw there at the time, when that mixtape came out. This came out just on a mixtape. Police got word, Rudy apparently heard about it, harassed them. Police, you know, roughed them up a little bit, it was a problem. And of course, my argument at the time was even any unsanctioned communication, even on a mixtape, was a problem, which is why the mixtape should always be remembered and appreciated in hip hop history. They don't even mention the history of the mixtape in this series, by the way. Just another thing we could add to the list. And the history of the mixtape is essential. Absolutely essential. I thought I was going to be in this documentary called Cassette, which is, it's pretty good, but I'm in it. But I would have wanted it to be actually more about the mixtape than the, I think, Swedish inventor of the cassette tape, which is what it became. And I was like, but the specific history of the hip hop mixtape is essential. And again, shout out to Reagan Summer McCoy and the hip hop, the Mixtape Museum, and that just, but that whole history deserves much more. Anyway, that's just another thing. Then the series, the episode does mention Amadou Diallo, just to point out, again, major cases of police violence that sparked a massive response. And for those of us of a certain age will remember, this was a huge case, what happened to Amadou Diallo. And at the time, it was a very soda type of issue, because Diallo was he Haitian, continental? I can't exactly remember where he came from. I'm sure somebody in the chat will remember, but he was not a Black American per se, but everybody was out. Because obviously the police who shot him in the vestibule 40 plus times, mistaking his wallet, weren't interested in what part of the transatlantic trade that, you know, where he got dropped off. So, but they mentioned that, but this is that slick stuff. And this was something I remember calling out in the 13th documentary, and I think is a major problem now. They will bring up these issues and these topics, but then the punditry that brings us back is the brother from, I don't know his name, I forgot his name, but who was a Black Lives Matter activist. So nobody from my generation, and maybe it's me just being old and hateful, but nobody from my generation is there. Rosa Clemente, who appears early in the series, is not interviewed here as maybe the lone hip-hop generation hip-hop activist. She's not there. So it's a very Black Lives Matter looking back type of reflection, as opposed to what were people actually doing. All of the various groups that would have gathered and participated in protesting and raising that up. Nothing. So I said, Black Lives Matter wasn't there. Where is our generation at? And it's not just because it's not particularly a generational thing, but it's a political thing. There was less of the nonprofit takeover of the analyses at that point, where there would, I think, probably been a more diverse flourishing of politics involved in the post-Diallo issue. And then, of course, they bring in Al Sharpton. Please go watch the video with Dr. Burroughs on Loudmouth, that documentary, because here comes Sharpton again, the only one with the narrative of what it was and this and that. And then they bring in John Forte, which I thought was curious. No disrespect. Not a big name in hip hop, no disrespect. Known more for his post-incarceration over that nonsense around weed, because he had also become a kind of a cause célèbre among white entertainers and celebrities. Like I remember, what's her name, who does, oh no, the thing to go, you don't know what you got till it's gone. That woman, she got involved and others got involved in his case, but we got to be real. He was not a major artist per se as an associate with the Fugees initially, and then, you know, but he's just brought in there. I don't know what, I don't know exactly what that was all about. But then again, I don't know what was all about with who they selected, period, because none of the mainstay hip hop scholars were there except for Dan Charnas. So you don't even get Jeff Chang. So you just needed Dan Charnas to maintain that similar, you know. They don't have any of the activists, none of the organizers, no mention of the Hip Hop National Convention. Not even a reference to all the hip hop scholarship that came up. So a lot of people did a lot of work. Not everything that, not even to say that I liked it all, but just the idea that you would leave it out is deep. And then they do something pretty slick. They roll in reference to Dead Prez. And I'm thinking, so you say nothing of X-Clan, nothing of Poor Righteous Teachers, nothing of Brother D. Nothing of the whole history with Latin quarters and all of that. Nothing. And then you give us this Dead Prez only visually in the studio, and we hear this is a half a verse from Police State. And I'm thinking, well, they had to, how would they ignore that? But no native tongues, no Mos Def and Kweli, no Black Star, no Roots, no nothing. No Angie Stone. Not really hip hop, but you know what I mean. Anyway. But nothing, we don't hear anything from Stick or M. We don't hear any analysis. We don't hear any discussion. We don't hear any thought. And why? One is simple. Again, Frankie foreshadowing. They did not support Obama. One surefire way. Neither did Rosa Clemente. I'm going to come back to that. One surefire way to make sure you're not in episode 4. Even if they hear your song. So because, and this is the slick stuff. So we hear the song about Police State, and then they come right back and say, and then what happened? 9/11 and George Bush. And everybody's an American again. But they don't even make reference to that Talib Kweli track. Remember? He had that critical line where he said something, niggas was an American until after 9/11 or something like that. No Immortal Technique, where they sampled Eminem on that track. Bin Laden didn't blow up the projects. It was you. Tell the truth. None of that. None of that. And there's even this, even in text verse in there is even saying, if someone invaded America, the hood would fight, not for America. And I remember at the time thinking, but even that, because his whole point of the track was Bin Laden didn't attack us. He attacked you. But that's not in here. That's not in here. That's not in here. What's in here is Black Eyed Peas' Where Is the Love after 9/11. Now, I might have been old generationally at that point, but nobody in my circles was feeling Black Eyed Peas. If anything, I was part of a group. I remember vividly telling people Black Eyed Peas aren't even what they used to be. They used to get tracks from Premiere. They used to be like real hip hop. Now they're doing all this fluffy, puffy, silly stuff. And we get Where Is the Love? And we get this will.i.am semi-interview where he's talking about what the people needed after 9/11, and it was this huge hit around the world. And of course it was, because it was some silly pro-American, support America nonsense. I don't even know if anybody who was a real hip-hop head was listening to that nonsense. It's not even a good, it was, I thought it was, I was not, no. But they don't mention that when they performed that song at Obama's inauguration, again, Frankie foreshadowing, they don't mention that that song got censored, that they censored out the line where they talk about the CIA. What was it? Something that they have some line in there about the CIA killing or surveilling people. Something. They took that out at the inauguration. They don't mention that. So my note here is Dead Prez is replaced by this Black Eyed Peas focus on a pro-American, pro-Obama message that is manicured for the inauguration. And then who comes in as the hip hop radical savior in the Bush era? Eminem. Eminem. And here's the slickest thing I thought they did with that too. First of all, you hear Eminem talking about, our troops are dying and Bush is sending us to war, and I needed to say something, and of course Eminem is a young man. My point isn't to blame my point isn't to blame young people and artists for not being as radical as they need to be. My point is that the history that's being retold and focused on to tell a new generation not to be radical is using that instead of any number of other things from rap artists and activists and all this other stuff. They skip over everything. There's no acknowledgement of anything. I think there's one passing reference to Dame Dash saying something about rappers needing a union. But none of the efforts in the hip hop activist whatever, none of it is, it's like it never happened, according to this series. So you get this, so all we're left with is this reflection from a young Eminem about what how bad Bush is, and it's bad for the troops, and it's, America's the best, he says, and we got to do better than this, So we get Eminem. And we get Killer Mike coming back to remind us how important that Dre was to the rise of Eminem. And of course, this is a good thing. And Killer Mike is doing his little, I'm blacker than thou, and I'm going to remind you about Dre when you talk about Eminem, as opposed to what some of us might say is Dre and his desire to be the new Puffy and the new black capitalist imposed. He's punishing us with Eminem. And then we get Katrina. Oh, Katrina. So again, none of the accurate history of Katrina, none of the accuracy about the fact that, as it was reported at the time, the hurricane did not hit New Orleans. And there was that one headline I used to talk about all the time that said, "We dodged a bullet. It could have been worse." No discussion of the levees. What we got was Killer Mike and an old Lil Wayne interview saying, "I'm upset. I'm past upset about my people on the roof and in the water. The government." And when Killer Mike is on screen saying this was a sign that the government can't do for us, the government has abandoned us. They don't play the Kanye clip. I wonder if that was a response to current Kanye. George Bush don't like black people or care about black people. But when Killer Mike is saying that, I know I got my issues and, whatever, my biases, but tell me if you see this and you don't read it as Killer Mike, the subtext that the unspoken line is Killer Mike is saying the government can't do it for us, but black business can. That Andy Young tree that he comes out of, that's what I heard him saying. Because the response, as Killer Mike and others reminded us, was that hip hop came through. Diddy and Jay-Z came in there, and they got clips of Diddy and Jay-Z bringing in the money. And David Banner did a concert for the people. So no reference to all the grassroots folks doing stuff on the ground. No discussion of what was really happening to the people. No discussion of why would it be necessary. This was the moment when my brother Saswat, this was the moment where he gave me a 180 on this point from his correctly radical perspective. I'm not giving money to the Red Cross. I'm not giving money to charity. Not because I don't care about the people, but because A, the money doesn't get to the people, and B, we're in the most powerful state in the world with the most money in the world. Why should we have to give to anybody? So my point, that's sort of my point about Killer Mike. The the spoken text should have been, yeah, the government abandoned us, and that's because the state is opposed to us as opposed to working for us. We shouldn't have to rely on Jay-Z and Puffy going down there. We shouldn't have to rely on David Banner doing a free concert. That, by the way, didn't do anything to bring the people back to their homes. To what was that one white politician at the time who was quoted as saying that Katrina did them a favor, that by giving them the just cause to get rid of all the poor Negroes? None of that is brought up. Why? Because the narrative that hip hop is a good thing and saved us has to be told. So we get Jay-Z and Diddy and David Banner and nothing else. The fact that there's so many things we could fill in here. Obama came into office after that event, and a year or two later, and was, or even several years or 3 years later, and there was a group in the South that assessed his response to Katrina all those years later and gave him a D. So in other words, there was he didn't come in and fix anything. Nothing about the people getting shot. None of that stuff. Remember that story came out? I know nobody will remember that my little associated crew and I were among the first to tell that story before the white boy with all this whatever told it. But we were just on little WPFW. We had heard black people saying white folks are shooting us. None of that's in there. None of that's in there, man. I mean, it's really crazy. And it is, I admit, it is a crazy moment to be now old enough to see stuff you've lived through getting told as history and told in a way like, wait a minute. So now when my godfather says, if everybody who, as he uses, he says, as if everybody who claimed to have been on the Edmund Pettus Bridge had actually been there, would have collapsed back in Selma. Now we get to see the same thing. Oh, Katrina was hard. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, Katrina. Oh, Ferguson. Oh, Black Lives Matter. Oh, it was amazing. It was terrible. It was, so many. Wait a minute. Either you wasn't there or you weren't engaged in that way, or that's not what happened. It's wild. It's just wild. And then that section ends. It's so perfect. With Diddy and everybody saying we need a black president to solve these things. If we had a black president, we would be this stuff wouldn't happen anymore. And then here comes Obama. So again, you can't have Rosa. That's what I was wondering. You can't have Rosa Clemente even blip in this episode. She had to be relegated to previous episodes. Why? Because in 2008, she was running for vice president of Green Party with Cynthia McKinney. And I watched her and Cynthia directly. I watched directly as they struggled to get any response from hip hop journalists, this group, that group. And nobody was listening as all of us were over there like, this Obama thing ain't gonna work. This is not a good idea. No mention, of course, of Glenn Ford or Bruce Dixon, Margaret Kimberly. Obviously, they're not going to mention me, that little Black Agenda Report crew that was like, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. All the rappers, Dead Prez, who you throw in there, they were with us. I mean, it's just wild. It's wild. So when you see Lupe Fiasco get thrown in here, I don't even remember what he was saying. But what I do remember is that they don't talk about the fact that Lupe Fiasco said himself at one point some years ago he was going to commit suicide because the record label wasn't putting out his record. And it was destroying his whole emotional state of whatever, blah, blah, blah. They don't talk about that because the whole narrative has to be hip hop saved the world and everything is on its way to getting better, if not better. So it becomes this whole thing about hip hop and voting. We got to get a black president. Obama coming in is great. Changing of the guard. Everything's going to get better. It's improving. and then to save themselves because they know that it's 2023 and they know enough people watching this monstrosity will have lived through the Obama 8 years and will know without provocation that fantasy was nonsense. So they got to come back with, they sold us literally. Who said this? Was it David Banner? No, was it Killer? I can't remember. Somebody says, no, it wasn't David Banner. Somebody says they sold us hope like heroin. And then here comes Al Sharpton to say, people thought if we got a black president elected, that everything was going to get fixed. But obviously, there's still other things that have to be done. And I'm sitting there typing in bold letters because you told us everything was going to be fixed. You literally, Sharpton, again, it's not in the series, but some of us remember you literally came out and said you won't even protest Obama. You literally said in 2007, 8, whatever, Obama's presidency will be an Al Sharpton-less affair. You all rolled out all these mainstream artists to suppress the radical artists and movements, to tell us to vote for this man. And when it clearly doesn't work, you then come back to say, well, we didn't tell you it was good. I mean, obviously it wasn't good. The same thing with the investors and the crypto-gandists and everything. Get your crypto. Oh, we didn't tell you to overinvest in the crypto. You should have diversified and had some in real estate. I mean, it is banana. It is banana. I may be frustrated, even mad at them, but I'm never going to blame these young people for not knowing any better. Like, how this is the narrative that's being pumped. How? They don't even acknowledge. I mean, I'm serious. In 4 shows, they don't even acknowledge at all that an entire field of hip hop studies emerged. Again, I'm not in love with a lot of it, but the point is, even acknowledging that might allow for people, in a way that contradicts my own argument, to even be alerted that there's a body of literature out there where all of this stuff is debated and considered. They don't even acknowledge that it exists. So I wrote here, and then they come in, and then right after that Sharpton point, the thing that reminds us that things aren't better is that Trayvon Martin is killed while Obama's president. I wrote here, my next note was, how do I make plain that Killer Mike is Andy Young and anti-MLK? How am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to explain to students or anyone else that when you see Killer Mike up there, you're seeing the descendant politically of the one Dr. King said is a capitalist and part of the problem? To distinguish himself, that is to distinguish King as something not part of that apparatus spreading this nonsense. Killer Mike claims to come out of the Andy Young tree and is performing it here, narrating for us and being positioned as the radical spokesperson. What am I supposed to do? Then they come back with another censored revolutionary artist, Kendrick Lamar, to tell us that his anthem is the voice of the Black Lives Matter protest post-Ferguson. Because after Trayvon, of course, Michael Brown gets killed. They leave out Sean Bell because that's just one, it's just too many, where Obama did nothing. And then Kendrick does the same, we get the same thing. Kendrick does, it's all right. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. He too gets censored at the Super Bowl. And the line about the po-po, we hate po-po, blah, 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 blah. That gets censored. So literally the sort of bookend artists that we get displaying for us the continuity of fighting the power, each of them got censored in service of the state apparatus they're defending as part of this ridiculous narrative. And then we thought they were done. Oh no, because after that comes Trump, of course. And they do mention how hip hop had a lot of references historically to Trump. Many of us had pointed that out. But again, the response, the radical critique of that we get coming from hip hop is Eminem. Now older, smarter, wiser. Having evolved as our spokesperson since his last delivery under George Bush, to tell us, I don't care if it divides my fan base. If you don't like Donald Trump, if you like Donald Trump, this is the division line for you. But my note here is, but if Trump divides your fan base, then what the hell are we saying about what hip hop has produced for the world? In other words, if half of your fan base like Donald Trump, then what is this nonsense about hip hop tanning America and making it ready for a multicultural, diverse world and Black leadership? And what the hell are you doing? Happily rocking out with half your audience being willing to support a Donald Trump, as if supporting Biden was some revolutionary activity. So what does that say? That to me is evidence of my argument. If the biggest rapper becomes Eminem and half of his audience are Trump supporters, according to his own assessment, then obviously hip hop as a history, as a cultural art form, as an expression, as a militant voice of the people failed. All right, George Floyd, of course, gets killed. We have to suffer more of that video in this series, and nothing is said about the corporate response, corporate responsibility, and all the kind of the proliferation of dollars, because clearly this PBS series is an extension of that. And we get another clip of Killer Mike speaking out. None of it in the context of him doing so in defense of Black business and Black corporate politicians and whatnot. And then it's over, and the series is over, and that's that. And to me, it doesn't. It just lasts on this point. It doesn't matter to me if nobody sees the series, because in other words, it doesn't matter to me if my students don't directly see the series outside of me assigning it. That's the narrative that's being pushed everywhere. And I think it is, and I never thought I would say this, given that I had my own, even because at the time, as it was happening, I didn't even, not that I was doing that much academically with it, but even in what work I was doing, I didn't want to be associated with those hip hop scholars. I mentioned earlier when Ryland Rabaka put me in a sentence next to Michael Eric Dyson under this hip hop scholar rubric, I was like, I thought we were cool with each other at the time. I was like, I thought we were cool with each other. Like, I don't want to be, if I'm associated with that, then I failed, and you're not, or I've failed in the work that I've, But my point is, even with my resistance to that label, I never thought I really would have. I am naively surprised, I admit, that not one mention of it, none of the work. No Trisha Rose, no Robin Kelly, obviously no James Spady, no even that, what was it, the multiple readers that have been produced. I mean, none of the hip hop feminists, none of the chicken heads come home to roost, none of it. None of it. No no Tony Blackman Freestyle Union, no Hip Hop National Convention, no nothing. I mean, it is wild. So okay, all right. I'm jumping in the chat. What's going on? Oh, we got money. Josie Gonzalez, 50 as promised. Cheers to BPM second anniversary. Thank you, Josie. Appreciate you. Ron Hall, thank you. Blacks endorsing capitalism makes as much sense as you endorsing Nazism. I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that analogy. And that's what this is. Oh man, this was wild. This was wild. It was worse than I thought. And I'm glad they didn't put Rosa in this last one. I mean, obviously I'm mad that they erased that whole history, but I'm glad she didn't pop up in this one. I'm not on his phone anymore. He told me as soon as he said, don't text me anymore. I didn't even respond to that text. As soon as I'm overboard with it. As soon as you tell me to leave you alone, you're going to get left alone. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. I'm overboard with it. So no, he's never going to hear from me again. And that's fine because clearly I was having no positive impact. Man, where is the love? I'm telling you, they talked about this like it was the anthem, the global anthem. I was like, I was oh man. Anyway, so yeah, thank you very much for the support. More than ever, BPM is necessary. This is 41. There was so much music came out about this. There was so much music that came, and they do mention a little bit of there's a reference to after Diallo was killed, one of the pundits, Dr. Whitehead, says something like it felt like that hip hop went back to its foundation. And I was like, but it never left that foundation. And there's no discussion other than that one passing phrase, off-screen narration from Chuck D, where he says early on, yeah, the record labels were peeling back or something like that, the consciousness or the politics, blah, blah. There was plenty of stuff to do. But there's no ongoing discussion, again, because so much of the activism was around corporate consolidation, payola, no discussion of that, playlists, all of those fights. Oh my God. Like they left out all that, no Smack Fest, no battles with Hot 97 and Enos Communication and like all of that and Clear Channel and Radio One and all of that is just completely wiped out. And then as I'm saying, they don't even mention the existence of an entire body of knowledge of hip hop scholarship in which you would find all of these debates and arguments and perspectives. Again, a lot of which I don't agree with, but that's not the point. The point is it's there and they are like, it don't even exist because everything is just getting better. It's not perfect. There's still a lot to fight for. And they show us the 2020 update of Fight the Power with Nas in them in it. So it's, but wow. No, if anything, hip hop is eaten. Hip hop has been being slowly devoured from day one. It's not, and it's never self. Oh, sorry, Hot 97 is for a time was the dominant hip hop radio station in New York City, and it had a reverberating power throughout the nation. It was huge. I don't know to what extent it's still that big, but it was huge. Who created hip hop? A Pan-African community forced into colonial existence in various parts of the diaspora, and New York in particular. And then it was immediately colonized. It weaponized against us. Oh yeah. Oh man. Man, shout out to the late great Dr. James Turner. One of the few times I saw him get sort of outside his emotional pocket was in talking about that very documentary. And his attitude was exactly what I'm feeling right now. Because he said something, I remember him talking about, I forgot exactly the names, but he was talking about one of the famous white and probably Jewish jazz artists who had been given some prominent spot in some Harlem nightclub as opposed to a black jazz artist. And Ken Burns talked about it in that documentary as like a great moment. And Turner was just, and he didn't never as animated as I am. He was way too cool for that. But for him, he was not happy. But yeah, Ken Burns. So this is the Ken Burnsing. That's another good point. That's the Ken Burnsing of yeah. I'm not mad. I mean, that and I actually did a research paper in grad school about his documentary on I can't remember, Lewis and Clark. The good part was I got to read a lot of fascinating theoretical work about documentaries and film criticism and stuff like that. And all the smart people can't stand Ken Burns. I like all the brilliant academics were hating on him thoroughly. No, I don't think it's cannibalized because it's not self-done. It's not, and that's what I hear when I hear cannibalized. Maybe I'm not getting it. No, hip hop has been colonized because it's the product of a colonized community or colonized communities. And that's what's going to happen. And this is a perfect example of it. And this retelling, and PBS for me has never better represented Fanon's radio alger than this series. I mean, this is a no. No Gil Scott-Heron. Although Gil Scott-Heron at the end of his life said Obama was the revolution. So unfortunately, that was in print in the Washington Post. That hurt to read. But no. I mean, but because again, yeah, I don't know. No, but no. It was really bad. It was really, really bad. It was, so but okay, I think we all yeah, I got all my, I said everything that I had to say. I don't, it is what it is. So now I got to figure out a way to make these points to my students. I mean, because the series would require, and it's again, not just the series, it's the narrative. That narrative requires so much. There's so much. Wow, they really, that is remarkable. They really did some. Yeah, no, Gil, that was a tough one. That was a tough one. Obama messed us up, man. And the only thing I do try to remember, and I don't think this is my original point. I can't remember where I'm getting this, but nobody had seen that before. So nobody, I remember we debated Amiri Baraka on my radio show back in the day, and it was horrible. It was terrible. But nobody, not even the best revolutionary had seen that moment of Obama and the propaganda and and how skilled he was and how, I mean, it was such a powerful, so it was bad enough to be marginalized in the moment, but to be reminded and sort of double down on the burying by these PBS series is even more difficult. I mean, it's like another layer, puns intended, of difficulty. It's just, and nothing about Obama's complicitness in any of this. So there was no critique of Obama. It was just left with, as in Sharpton's words, there were other powerful forces at play. He couldn't do everything. And that's the narrative that they used to get themselves out. So they don't. There was no discussion of how he killed EFCA, the Employee Free Choice Act. There was no discussion of how he. I'm nothing about AFRICOM, nothing that he would have. Nothing. None of his lies. Nothing. He just got elected. It was great, and it would have been better if it wasn't for that mysterious other, Republican or whatever. Nothing about him being the Goldman Sachs president. Nothing. Yeah. People really, Jesse crying on screen. Everybody was crying. It was just. So that's why I put the link to the Obama debates in the show description for this episode, so people could be reminded that there were some of us. I told my students, my one little, and I sent them an email, just to mess with them a little bit. But we're reading Josh Myers' book, and he's got this part in his Du Bois chapter where he says, a lot of people bought the fraudulent presentation of Du Bois and allowed that to be, their line to buy into supporting Obama. And like nowhere, even in a footnote, does he acknowledge all of the many of us. And I know he do because he used to listen to my show too when he was still, he's still there, when he was at Howard. So he knew about all of us out here arguing, and he didn't even put it, not all of us bought it. So it's like, don't forget, like some of us were down, like that's going to be my line. Like as we're all getting wiped out, as the planet collapses, I'm going to have my hand on somebody's neck saying, I told you. My last words were, I told you. Anyway. All right, good people. Thank you very much for coming through. Right on. Yeah, absolutely. But you know what? But it's bad enough that people will say, Solberg, that your vote didn't amount to anything. It's worse that they won't even acknowledge the campaign you voted for existed. And that's where we're at. It didn't even exist. Damn. Anyway. All right, good people. As always, please like, share, subscribe, support the channel. There's a lot of stuff coming out. Make sure the bell is clicked so you don't miss anything. And I'll see you Friday, if not sooner, with Earn Your Liberation. We got a thing tomorrow with a video gamer from Hawaii who's involved with freeing the land there as well. So I'm learning about it. Shout out to Josh and Aaliyah putting us on some good guests. Anyway, so just make sure you know what to do. Catch you later. Peace, everybody. Thanks for joining.
I mix what I like.